And then again, when to penetrate versus when to possess. So ideally we can go forward right off transition, but there are moments in the game where the other team gets organized quickly, or they haven't had a chance to expand their team shape yet. So therefore the opportunity to go forward may not be there. So recognizing and teaching the players in this age group to recognize the difference between patience in possession and looking to penetrate and play to go forward. So those are all things to hit on over the course of a year within the 9v9 learning goals as we look at transitional moments into attack. And then finally, transitional moments into defending. Again, recognizing the moment of transition. Recognize the moment of transition. Can we flip transition like a light switch immediately as soon as we've lost possession? The light switch turns and we've immediately queued into the next action. Getting the numbers around the ball to press. So again, setting the edge, stealing the edge if we're high enough up the field. And then how does that change if we're not high enough up the field? So if we're defending, if we lose possession, hopefully not, but if we lose possession in our own defensive third, we don't necessarily want to set the edge and force the ball, or excuse me, seal the edge and force the ball back inside, because that's where the goal is. We may want to set an edge and really, really force the ball wide and deny service. So those types of things, those types of tactical choices need to be discussed, especially in the transitional moment of how that first pressure comes. How do we recover shape into covering and balancing positions? Can we create pockets of pressure and set traps to win the ball? And then again, the third defender movements based on the pressure cues. Are we recognizing the opponent's attempt to play an early ball forward? So are we recognizing to drop and get side on and drop as a unit? Or are they looking to play to a target in front of us? So we need to maybe step up, squeeze, provide pressure, provide pressure and cover to the first defender on that target player to deny their ability to play from there. So that's it. So that's kind of all of the cues, all of the curriculum for the 9v9. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, so I'll perk up just a little bit here, guys. So two things, I think there's a lot of things, but two things that I want to press on, and Jeremy, I'm going to ask some questions of you. First, within transit, so when we think of transition to defend, right, the similar cue in that the best pass and the first pass, right? But the first defender cue, usually the person that loses the ball, especially if it's on the dribble, is going to be that first defender. And the better pressure they get sets the tone for the rest of the team around them, right? And so, like, do you specifically teach anything or use anything specifically in that moment of concentration that's needed, and what that does for the people behind them?
Well, I think what we talk about with the 7v7 and the 4v4 models in the defensive side is the immediate chase. And so the idea being that they will have that information or have some experience with that expectation by the time they get into 9v9. So yes, the answer is yes, there should be some cueing that goes on there to help remind the players and help get the players tuned into that reality. But it's something that probably should have been hit, or we should be trying to hit within the 7v7 and the 4v4 curriculum. And if the players don't have it at 9v9, then feel free to go back into the 7v7 and 4v4 curriculums and review those topics to make sure the players can do what you're asking them to do with the 9v9 curriculum.
Yeah. And now what about the use of futsal as a learning tool, right? So, like, again, as I'm listening to this webinar and I'm thinking about what we're currently using as our best teaching mechanisms, it's futsal, right? And inside of futsal, really important things that I think of: transition to defend, set the edge and seal the edge, right, with your front two defenders. And you guys will get so many opportunities to do that, right? And you'll find that the better they do that, the more games they're rewarded with, the more goals that they're rewarded with, et cetera, et cetera. But then if we think about transition to attack, right, specifically using the dribble, right? And I think that you had it in here as, go back a screen or two if you could. You might need to, okay. When to penetrate versus when to possess, right? So, like, the really valuable thing to think about, guys, in here, and girls, is that trend, that when to penetrate versus possess inside of futsal will create the numbers, right? The penetration specifically on the dribble, if they're good with the dribble, that's always going to get your opponent out of balance, and that's going to create a ton of numbers up opportunities for your team. And so like that's one of the really big things that I push on with my teams in futsal is we want to see you dribbling more to get into those decision-making moments rather than just winning it and playing it and winning it and playing it and winning it and playing it, right? Because most teams play square, right? They play a 2-2 inside of futsal, most of what you're going to play against. And so that really is, if they can step in front and win and drive, it's straight away as a 3v2. So I think that that's really important within that transition to attack, is to be thinking about going back to these learning goals and refreshing on them, right, those opportunities.
Right. And so, and again, yeah, you know, it's how do we make those overloads in attacking moments? And you know, the 99 curriculum talks a lot more about kind of the team side of things and more of the passing side of things, but going back into that 4v4 and 77, where it's really all about ball, you know, ball familiarity, ball comfort, and the individual skill. There's no problem with using those learning goals to accentuate this exact topic in the format like the futsal setting, because the numbers are smaller in futsal, because the space is tighter in futsal. So you don't have as many of the big picture stuff to address, but you can certainly go back to the nuts and bolts of the individual skills, the 1v1. How do you make 1v1 create an overload? How do you use that to create a 2v1 or a 3v2? And again, in particular in moments of transition, and then recognizing how to possess versus penetrate out of that. So you're kind of using the younger age group curriculums as a to bridge into this curriculum here and going forward. And again, futsal would be a nice tool and vehicle to do that.
Anybody else have questions?
Yeah, I do. Gosh, echo. When you earlier in the webinar, you had mentioned that you use the 3-1-3-1 as a formation. Can you just not elaborate too much, but just really quickly say why you use that and how that translates into 11v11 in terms of how you want to set up, or how Vail wants to set up in 11v11? Like, why is that important for the overall learning
So
for the Vail players?
that's a great question. So, and it's a little bit of a preview into next week, but so the 3-1-3-1 shape provides, you know, it provides balance across the width of the field. So you have your three backs, so you can defend on both sides. You have the midfield, the balance across the midfield, and then you have a pair of midfielders working in specific roles. So by having the pair of midfielders working in specific roles, you're starting to delineate the tasks and starting to get them working off of each other. Okay, and then it also gives you a single striker shape that, again, when we look at moving to 11v11, our most common shape that we will talk about is some version of a 4-3-3, whether that's a 4-3-3 with one holding midfielder, whether that's a 4-2-3-1 with two holding midfielders. I really see that as a variation on a 4-3-3 with just maybe, you know, your wingers tucked in a little bit, but three definite center midfielders in that space. So you start talking about midfielders having different roles and responsibilities and understanding how to interchange and interplay with each other. You talk about playing in a one striker system. So your striker and your forwards are learning the movements when they're isolated or numbers down, in terms of holding onto the ball, in terms of linking play with the players around them. Your midfielders, and specifically your midfielders and outside backs, your wingers and outside backs, are being trained from an early age to look for those overlapping moments. So again, if the 7 tucks in field, that's the cue for the 2 to be looking to get around them. If the ball is on that side, how do we expose that space and look to outnumber the opposing 3? You know, so those are the types of situations that lend themselves to really great learning moments in the 99, and then carry over into the 11v11 game. And again, we're not trying to steal the tactical idea from the staff. So, you know, again, I think Zach plays more of a 4-2-3-1 or a 4, or at least with a 4-3-3 with more 2 holding midfielders. I like to play it with 1 holding midfielder, so that I have more of an 8 that can attack a little bit more often. And both are fine. It's just that this shape, that 3-1-3-1, we think gives a great platform for which to learn that. The two things that kind of need to be filled in the when you change is working in that third midfielder and working in your second center back. So how do you teach the relationship between the two center backs, and how do you teach your midfielders to operate in some form of a triangle as opposed to other areas of the field? So if you were to use a two center back system with this, then you're borrowing from either a midfield space or you're borrowing from a wide space, and it kind of unbalances the way that your team thinks about the game from 9v9 to 11v11. And this, we think, does a great job of maintaining that balance.
Yeah, I'll add to that too, AJ. And then if you have any extra questions, just pop back on. I know we have about 2 minutes. The additional things that I like about it that Jeremy and I talk a bunch about is defending with a front three, right? Like that's really important to us at this age, is learning how to press and learning how to set and seal the edge from those front three players, because that allows you to transition the ball higher on the fields. And then this, relative to a 4-2-1-1, gives multiple players in wide spaces to create the overloads rather than playing into it and off of a target, right? We want the kids to explore the early running from the outside backs to give us the overloads, and having multiple players in those spaces allows for that, rather than a 4-2-1-1. You're going to be looking for them to play more centrally and down the center of the fields, and we tend to play more through the wider spaces. Any other questions?
Yeah, I had a quick one, just going back to the idea that going from 7v7 4v4 where dribbling is more encouraged. Do you have any way that you have found useful to frame that, how that decision making is going to change for them, or just different phases of play? Or
I think one of the things that I do a lot, so I use a specific rondo where you play with a goal that's a triangular goal in the middle, and I give kind of a point structure for the different decisions you make. And I think what I really like about that game is that the kids get to start to see they can have a much higher degree of success relative to their effort they put in with possession and passing and sharing the ball. And so you start to train them to think, okay, well, if I can't go forward, I should just keep it. And then whoever I'm keeping it with, they should be looking to go forward, and so on. I think the biggest challenge you run into when you go from the 7v7 age group is the desire for each player to have the ball and want the ball and be good on the ball and want to have it, not share it, because there's only one ball and there's 14 players on the field. And now when you're getting into 9v9, you have one ball and 18 players on the field. And so their time on the ball is, relatively speaking, even smaller. And so that's why it's important to start teaching those, and it's important to start working on kind of the maturing process of their decisions, I guess is the best way to put it. But that's been my experience with how to go about it, is to start with those games that teach the difference between the risk associated with the dribble versus the risk associated with the pass. And again, sharing the idea that we can be very successful collectively, provided we are moving the ball quickly and collectively together.
Cool. All right, guys. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Again, another 30 minutes. We appreciate it. We'll get into 11v11 next week. I'm sure there'll be more questions, so we'll get through it a little bit quicker so that we can dig into it a little bit further. I like the questions portion. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Jeremy, you got to stop the recording.
I'm working on it.